Now in the comic spirit. For the sake of God, Abraham makes of himself a comic fool. Abraham now knows that to have sacrificed Isaac with purity of heart would have been no different from Abraham's merely binding of Isaac with purity of heart. So it's a binding of Isaac. And Abraham called the name of that place God Sees, as it is said to this day, in the mountain where God is seen, taking the translation which I gave before. Abraham then calls the place a place where God sees and is seen. God has looked out on Abraham, the one who now knows how utterly other God is from the world, and Abraham has seen God to be the king of the empty portrait. Appropriate background music for that historic event. And now the angel blesses Abraham. Not before, but the blessing in the Bible comes only at, note, it doesn't come after the sacrifice of the border sacrifice of Isaac. It comes only after he sacrifices the ram. Now he gets the blessings. And the angel called unto Abraham a second time. By myself I have sworn, because you have done this thing and have not withheld your son, your only son, for I will bless you. Only now does the angel bestow blessings upon Abraham. Abraham was not blessed immediately after the halting of the sacrifice of Isaac. The blessings are not given to Abraham until after Abraham has done this thing. The thing being the sacrifice of the ram. And now, and only now, can he be blessed for having been willing to sacrifice Isaac. Scene 2. So Abraham returned unto his young men, and they rose up and went together to Beersheba. And Abraham dwelt at Beersheba. According to Jewish tradition, Abraham was tested with 10 trials and passed all of them. According to most commentators, the episode of the near sacrifice of Isaac was the final test. Abraham comes back down the mountain, never needing to be tested again. To conclude, the Akedah has been given many interpretations, but perhaps none quite like this one that I am attributing to Reb Nachman of Breslov. This interpretation departs radically from the traditional Jewish atonement theology of the Akedah. In its place, we have a theology of a spurious infinity turned into a comedy in 2 acts. Thank you. Any questions? No questions, then we'll go home. Yes, sir.
Why do you say spurious infinity? Because in a way, I mean, Rabbi Nachman has the idea of, not in a Hegelian sense, but he has the idea of...
One second, let me get this back on. I like that picture, okay? I'm sorry.
Okay, I mean...
Yeah.
He has the idea of an infinity, not it seems to me, not a spurious infinity. The infinitude is so strong an interpretation is interpretation that everything becomes a joke. So I guess my question would be, how far is one going to take it? Because if one wants to take that all the way, then the whole text, in a way, it becomes why preserve anything of the text? Do you see what I'm saying?
Which text?
Or any text, because if God's infinitude is, if you want to go all the way with that notion of God's infinitude, why preserve any part of the text, especially since the text, especially since it's ethically so problematic. Do you see my point?
Well, you asked a number of questions. Let's go step by step. First, I was using spurious in quotes. That it's the spurious. I'm sorry. It's not a spurious infinity. You're right. That's a mistake. It's not a spurious infinity. That was a mistake. Thank you. It is the genuine infinity. What I meant was I have theology of a genuine infinity. Now, I'm not going to go into issues of the text or the ethics of the text. These are large issues which take us far beyond what we're talking about. But let me say this. Let me point out to you something I said here, which I'll elaborate now. And that is for Reb Nachman, again, this is said for the wise. The way to acknowledge God's holy otherness is to realize that everything you can do, the most sublime, the greatest sacrifice, you can put all of human effort into it, and you're not reaching God. So, and you doing this with great seriousness. The more seriously you do this, and the more intensely you do this, knowing its comic nature, so to speak, that in itself is the attestation of God's infinity. So that the keeping of the ritual and the intense keeping of the ritual, knowing as a wise person, right? He says quite different things about people who says are not wise. In fact, brings about the only sensible way of acting with this genuine infinity. Yes, sir.
I'm trying to put the two stories together, and maybe I'm looking too closely at certain elements in the Nachman of Bratslav story. And
Which two stories? I'm sorry.
I'm trying to put the Akedah story together
Okay.
with the Nachman of Bratslav parable. And what I'm wondering, Yehuda, is he goes into the country and he sees it as a country full of lies. Now, does this mean that Abraham's discovery is that the journey to Mount Moriah and everything there is lies?
No. What he discovers is that it's a joke. Of course, I'm using joke in an ironic sense, right? He realizes the comic nature, right? This is the term that Rav Nachman himself uses. What I'm suggesting is what he discovers is the corruption, the all of the limitations of finitude of the human condition, as it were. That's what he discovers.
Okay, here you're helping me. That then is all packed into that last moment, Act 2, Scene 2, right? That's when Abraham makes the discovery that all of this, in comparison to God's great finitude, is a joke. But we should not then read the other piece of this, that when the wise man goes to the country and hears its jokes, that all of those jokes are lies, because that then would make the Torah.
No, it doesn't say that. No, the two things here. Good. What he learns at the Temple Mount is that the service of God is, in Reb Nachman's language, a joke because of God's greatness. That's what he learns. Now, what he learns is why is it a joke? Because he becomes to see so starkly the limitations of the human condition, of the finitude of human conditions, which is full of corruption and lies. The world is on fire in that story of the king. The world is on fire. And so he finally sees that this is the distance is so great that it cannot be overcome. Now, Hegel claims that the Jews refuse to see this, and therefore they blame it all on their sinfulness. He's got something right about Jewish guilt there, but the point is that Reb Nachman is taking this and making it a central condition of serving God for the wise person. Yeah, Al, you had a question. Yeah, Al Paget. I'm sorry. Then Al Paget. Yeah.
Just a quick point about the bad infinite and the good infinite, or spurious and true infinite. First of all, I mean, for Hegel, right, the difference is metaphysical about our understanding of God, rather than about ritual and human life and how we approach our religious rituals, our understanding of religious rituals. So, just to recap again for Hegel, a bad infinity, whether Jewish or others, is not only the Jews have a bad concept of infinity, I think some people do too. There's one where the infinity of God is understood to be strictly and starkly over against and opposed to, sort of binary opposition to finitude, right? That's bad infinite for Hegel. And then good infinite is an infinite that necessarily includes the finite, that brings the finite into itself.
Right.
As Hegel thinks is the superior view because it's his view, right? And so he calls it the good view. What I don't understand, Yehuda, is how does that connect with what Reb Nachman is saying? Since it does still seem to me that in this parable you have what I think, first, well, let me just put it aside. I don't like Hegel's conception here at all. I think it's simplified and arrogant and lots of other things. But it does seem to me, if you start with that, then Rob Nachman, because this king is so utterly transcendent, right? And as you said, the portrait's got to be empty, finally, because it becomes nothing. You still have the spurious infinity. That is, the Nachman's conception of the Holy One is so utterly transcendent, right, that even when you do the commandments, you have to take them with a grain of salt and consider them a joke. I mean, he's just adding to the badness of the infinitude and the utter starkness of God. So that's the way it seems to me, anyway. I haven't studied.
Okay, good.
Why do you see this as overcoming?
Okay, here first let me make a clarification about good and bad infinity. I've read various explanations of this term. I think the best thing to say is that this is not really a good translation. The Schlecht, really, yeah. It's not bad. See, Hegel has argued. There's a lot that's stipulative in Hegel. He has an argument that the bad infinity is not really an infinity. So it's not just bad in the sense that he doesn't like it, but I think that's why I think the better translation is spurious. And his idea is that infinity has to be everything. I mean, it's all stipulative and begs the question. And if a finite is opposed to the infinite, then the infinite really isn't infinite. So it's not. And he has this kind of argument that this isn't properly called an infinite. That's why I think it's better to call it a spurious infinity. But the bridge to a ritual is when he says that the Jews are unhappy, or there's a deep unhappiness in Judaism, because the Jews have a conception of this, have a conception of infinity which is the spurious one, and there's no possibility. They're simply mistaken in thinking there's any possible way of bridging the gap to that infinity. So there's a total frustration. Okay, and failure in Jewish ritual, in Jewish practice. And then they go ahead, he calls them the obstinate Jews, which he admires from one point of view, but from another point of view doesn't. The obstinate Jews go ahead and pin that on their own sins. You know, if we only did it right, then we would do it. But we're always sinning, so we never do it. So that's, I think, is the connection. Now, Professor Plantinga.